41 years ago, a man in San Angelo vanished after leaving a bar in the early morning hours, leaving no trace and plunging his family into decades of despair. Police once suspected a local rancher whose truck was seen near the scene, but with no body and too few leads to pursue, the case quickly went cold. Yet all those years, a handful of people quietly believed the truth had never been buried under the Texas dust. Then one day, when new forensic technology was applied, and an 80-year-old witness unexpectedly came forward, they uncovered one detail every previous generation of investigators had missed, a detail powerful enough to change the entire case. Before we dive deep into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next parts. On a late September night in 1983, San Angelo lay under the lingering stifling heat of a scorching day, the thick, heavy warmth, typical of West Texas rising from the cracked pavement and mixing with relentless gusts that whipped red dust along Knickerbocker Road. The small town carried on as usual, but in the harsh stillness of the late night, every movement felt heavier, drawn out, as if time itself were coated in a thin layer of dust that made it slip by more slowly. The yellowish sodium streetlights flickered in the wind, casting a dim glow over the patchy asphalt streaked with red sand and shining down on the low, tightly packed rooftops. At the corner, the rusty Spur bar still had its lights on, the green and red neon reflecting off dusty windows like a faint heartbeat in the dead of night. The country music from the old jukebox finally fell silent as the place cleared out, leaving only the lingering smell of cigarette smoke and spilled beer on the wooden floor. Just after 1:10 a.m., the heavy wooden door swung open, and 32-year-old Jacob Merritt stepped outside. He gave a quick nod to the last two regulars, pulling out of the parking lot, then pulled his shirt collar up against a sudden cold gust that carried fine dust stinging across his face. To the right of the door, a silver-haired man leaned motionless against the railing, head slightly bowed, standing so still it was hard to tell whether he was watching Jacob or simply waiting for someone else. Jacob glanced at him briefly, but said nothing. He looked calm, in no hurry, but also in no mood to linger even a minute longer. He started across the parking lot as the darkness slowly swallowed it. Dust-covered vehicles sat motionless under the flickering streetlights, forming distorted shapes on the asphalt. Jacob's footsteps echoed lightly, blending with the wind whistling through the wire fence and the rattling of the metal sign out front. When he reached the edge of the lot, he turned onto the narrow path that led toward the Concho River, where public lights grew sparse and only a few weak yellow bulbs fought the strong wind. The air turned colder, as if the night mist mixed with fine dust was settling over all of Texas at this seasonal turning point. Jacob walked alone, his shadow stretching long across the pavement and trembling each time the lights flickered. Suddenly, a powerful gust whipped through, kicking up a thick cloud of red dust that blurred his vision for several seconds. Just as the dust hadn't yet settled, a strange vehicle came speeding from the distance, its headlights cutting a sharp beam across the road, passing Jacob, then disappearing into the darkness. The moment happened too fast for anyone to make out the license plate or identify the vehicle, and then, after the taillights vanished at the end of the road, the street fell silent again, as if nothing had moved at all. That was the last moment anyone ever saw Jacob Merritt. The next morning, Jacob didn't show up for his shift at the machine shop like always. Co-workers called, no answer, just endless ringing. The family searched everywhere, asked friends, checked every route he usually took, but no one knew what had happened after he left the rusty Spur. The first hours passed in quiet tension, no sign, no clue, only the eerie silence of a man who had vanished completely into the night. As hope that Jacob would simply walk back home faded with every passing minute, the family finally had no choice. They officially called the San Angelo Police Department to report that Jacob Merritt had disappeared under circumstances no one could explain. When the missing person call came in early that morning, San Angelo police quickly determined this was not a routine failure to stay in touch. Jacob Merritt was punctual, had no history of suddenly quitting jobs or disappearing without warning, and the fact that he hadn't come home and missed work was enough to raise real alarm. Just before 9 a.m., the first two patrol officers were already on Knickerbocker Road. The Rout family confirmed Jacob usually took home. Morning temperatures were already climbing, kicking up layers of red dust with every passing vehicle, and that same dust made tracing any tracks far harder. The search team quickly set up a search grid along the route from the Rusty Spur to the River Edge area. It was highly likely Jacob had headed this way, as described in the initial reports, so officers divided the area into strips, one walking the shoulder, another scanning close to the grass and ditches to make sure nothing unusual was missed. Footprints were carefully examined on any soft patches the overnight wind hadn't completely dried. In a few spots, they noted shoe impressions that could match Jacob's size, but the prints were very faint. Only the general shape of the toe remained, while the heel had been almost completely erased by wind. These traces weren't conclusive, but they were flagged with small stakes for later analysis. At the parking lot behind the bar, the last place Jacob had been seen, they lingered longer, hoping for clearer evidence. By now though, new vehicles had parked and others had left, mixing fresh tire tracks with old ones. Only a few areas showed more disturbance than usual, but nothing clear enough to suggest a struggle. Officers expanded outward along the narrow path Jacob was said to have taken toward the Concho River. There the wind blew harder, whipping dry grass and fine dust, making surface observation even tougher. Footprints were jumbled, some sections looked trampled, but exact timing couldn't be pinned down. While one group scoured the outdoors, another team returned to the Rusty Spur to interview witnesses. The bartender confirmed Jacob left alone, perfectly sober and showing no odd behavior. One customer, however, recalled seeing Jacob exchange a few words with the silver-haired man before leaving. A third customer remembered Jacob leaving earlier, closer to 12:50 instead of after 1 o'clock. The timeline immediately showed small but notable inconsistencies. No two people gave the exact same time, with statements varying by minutes or even tens of minutes, perfectly possible from memory in a noisy bar, but also possibly hiding something off. Around 11 a.m., a major discovery shifted everything. A patrol officer reported that Jacob's Ford F-100 had been located, not near the bar's back lot as the family assumed, but sitting in an empty field several blocks away, at the edge of a road almost no one used at night. What stood out, its location did not match the direction Jacob was last seen walking. He had turned toward the Concho River path, yet the truck was found in the complete opposite direction. No damage to the body, no signs of break-in or theft, but the position simply didn't fit any description of Jacob's route that night. This instantly halted all initial assumptions. If Jacob left the bar alone and walked toward the river, why was his truck found somewhere else entirely? And more importantly, if he was walking, who drove the truck to its current spot? That question, arising within the first hours, made the entire search team realize this disappearance was far more complicated than a drunk man getting lost or having an accident on the way home. The truck was not where it was supposed to be, and to an experienced investigator, that is always a red flag. Something abnormal is waiting to be uncovered. As the area around Jacob's Ford F-100 was cordoned off, the Texas midday sun beat down mercilessly, sending waves of red dust rising in the scorching heat. The truck sat oddly still at the edge of the vacant lot, as if someone had abandoned it in a hurry, yet calmly enough not to draw attention. Officers approached cautiously, documenting every detail before opening the doors. The moment the driver's door was pulled open, the first thing they heard was the radio still on, emitting faint static as if someone had spun the dial but never landed on a station. That made no sense for someone who had just left a bar to head home. No one leaves the radio running all night and walks away. The team's initial feeling wasn't surprise but a clinging confusion. Inside the cab, the driver's seat immediately drew attention. It was pushed way too far back for Jacob's average build. Family and co-workers said Jacob was about 5'9", and always kept the seat in the same position. No one recalled him ever adjusting it recently. Now the distance from seat to steering wheel fit someone well over 6 feet. That detail could not be ignored. If Jacob had driven here, he wouldn't have left the seat like that, and if Jacob didn't drive, who sat in the driver's seat after he vanished? The team continued checking items inside. Jacob's wallet was missing from the cab, but his phone, some loose change, a broken pencil, and an old pair of sunglasses were all still there. Nothing taken, no signs of rummaging, nothing like a robbery or someone fleeing in panic. The doors were manually locked, but showed no pry marks. All of it painted a bizarre picture. The truck had been moved, yet there were no signs of theft, and nothing of even minor value was missing. Officers moved outside. At the right rear wheel, they spotted a second set of tire tracks, not from the Ford F-100, but from a vehicle with deeper, narrower tread. These tracks were fresh, clearer than Jacob's, and overlapped part of the dry ground. Clear evidence another vehicle had been here, around the same time the truck was left, but whose truck, and what role did its driver play in Jacob's disappearance? Those two questions had no answers yet, but were immediately flagged high priority. While sweeping the surrounding area, one officer bent down and picked up a small object, partially buried by wind-blown dirt. It was a dark-colored fabric scrap about 2 fingers wide, rough to the touch, apparently torn from a pickup seat cover. The color and material didn't match the Ford's interior, so it clearly came from another vehicle. The scrap was bagged immediately. No one knew then that years later, it would become one of the case's most crucial clues. When the search radius expanded 200 meters, more anomalies surfaced. An officer noticed a patch of softer ground among the grass, as if something heavy had been dragged across it. The drag mark wasn't distinct, no deep groove, but the surface soil structure had clearly changed in a way seasoned crime scene investigators don't mistake. The mark didn't just run a few meters, it continued almost to the edge of the vacant lot, heading toward a little used side road. No blood, no more fabric, no dropped items, just an eerie feeling that someone had struggled to drag something heavy, or someone, across this area. Putting together everything found that morning, the entire team knew Jacob's disappearance was no longer simple. Truck in the wrong place, seat adjusted wrong, radio on, belongings untouched, another vehicle's tire tracks, strange fabric scrap, and especially the faint drag mark, all separate pieces of something that had happened in the dark. No conclusion yet, no solid proof, but investigative instinct said Jacob did not leave this place on his own. When the first scene report was filed, the lead officer's short note silenced the room. High probability, this is not a routine missing person case. Jacob's Ford F-100 was towed to the San Angelo PD Technical Examination Yard that same afternoon, and from the moment it entered the bay, tension in the lab thickened. Investigators knew the truck might be the only thing that could tell them what happened the night Jacob vanished, and every tiny detail could matter. As the tech team began standard processing, the first step was fingerprinting inside and out. Powder was dusted over door handles, dashboard, gear shift, rear view mirror, and window edges. The results were frustrating. Aside from Jacob's own prints and a few smudges too faint to compare, no foreign fingerprints appeared. That could simply mean whoever touched the truck wore gloves, or the thick Texas dust had obliterated most traces, but whatever the reason, it stalled early analysis. No unknown prints is never good in a missing person case. After finishing that step, focus shifted to the undercarriage and wheels, especially the mud caked in the wheel wells and front chassis. A technician carefully scraped samples into stainless trays for soil analysis. Even to the naked eye, the mud color didn't match the red sandy soil where the truck was found. The caked mud was darker, stickier, higher in clay. The vacant lot soil was loose red sand that crumbled into dust. This alone proved the truck had definitely been somewhere else before being brought here, meaning someone drove it to this spot. Later lab results confirmed the suspicion. The samples contained high clay content and minerals not found anywhere near Knickerbocker Road. The idea that the truck just ended up there was impossible. No question, the truck had been moved. Back inside the cab, techs noted again that the driver's seat was pushed far too far back, 5 to 7 inches farther than suited Jacob, and discovered another detail: Jacob's keys were missing entirely. That wasn't unusual if he carried them on him, but family said he always kept a spare in the glove box for convenience. Now both the main key and spare were gone. The cab was searched thoroughly, every crevice checked with flashlights, but no keys turned up. The missing keys presented two possibilities: Either Jacob took them and vanished with them, or someone took the keys and drove the truck. In either scenario, the person who drove could not have been Jacob. Everything about the cab, from seat position to steering wheel tilt, said otherwise. The technical findings were meticulously logged. Radio on, seat wrong, foreign soil underneath, no keys, no unknown fingerprints. Any one detail alone could be coincidence, but together they painted a suspicious picture. The truck had been driven and parked here by someone else after Jacob disappeared. In the examination bay, no one spoke loudly, but everyone understood this was no longer a random disappearance. No accident indicators, no signs Jacob drove himself and walked away, and absolutely no reason for him to park there in the middle of the night. The only logical explanation: someone else sat in Jacob Merritt's driver's seat, and that person was directly connected to why Jacob Merritt vanished from San Angelo on the night of September 29, 1983. As the anomalies from Jacob's truck became clearer, the search commander decided to expand the ground search toward the Concho River, the direction witnesses said Jacob turned before disappearing. A Tom Green County SIR search and rescue team was deployed that afternoon, equipped with terrain scanners, cadaver dogs, and small inflatable boats to check shallow water near the banks. The Concho isn't a wide river, but many sections have soft, collapsing banks, especially after strong winds like the night before. If Jacob had an accident, or slipped into the water, SIR might find trampled grass, slide marks, or personal items near the edge. The team split into two groups from the intersection of the narrow road off Knickerbocker and the eastern riverbank, one heading downstream, the other upstream, using a tight line search formation, members spaced about 3 paces apart, eyes sweeping diagonally to cover maximum ground. Silence blanketed the area, broken only by rustling leaves and gentle water lapping against the bank. Along the riverbank, they found plenty of old footprints from fishermen and kids, but experience let them spot one area where soil had recently slid downhill, the surface layer peeling away to form a groove over a meter long. The slide wasn't deep and showed no clear drag marks, but it was enough to show the bank had partially collapsed recently. Notably, the displaced dirt curved slightly, as if a heavy object had been shoved or slid hard toward the water's edge. This was the first sign that matched the faint drag mark found earlier at the vacant lot. 2 suspicious marks in 2 different locations, now forming a worrying pattern of movement. Yet when SIR checked right at the water's edge, they found no belongings, no wallet, no clothing, no blood, and no evidence anyone had fallen in. Cadaver dogs sniffed the area, but reacted only weakly. Any scent Jacob might have left had been nearly erased by weather. The boat team probed shallow water and mud with long poles but recovered only rotten wood and trash. No unusual sounds, no clear impressions confirming an accidental fall. That made investigators doubt even more. If this were an accident, there should be signs of struggle, scratches in the dirt, something dropped, but there was nothing. The more they searched, the cleaner and emptier the whole area seemed for the scenario of a sober man falling into the river. The lead investigator stood for hours, watching the gentle current slide past water grass, and concluded in his end-of-day report that the chance Jacob accidentally slipped into the river was virtually zero. Instead, every indicator pointed elsewhere. Jacob had walked in this direction, but there was no proof he ever reached the riverbank. Someone could have intercepted him before he got that far, or even blocked him midway down that dark stretch with no cameras. By the end of the expanded search day, SIR was disappointed at the lack of tangible clues, but for the investigative team, the silence of the scene carried more weight than any discovery. No body, no blood, no accident signs, just faint soil slides, and the mystery of a moved truck no one could explain. Adding it all up, investigators recorded the case's first guiding conclusion: this was not an accident, and Jacob Merritt did not disappear naturally. The weeks following the expanded search along the Concho River dragged on under the heavy weight of a case that refused to move forward another inch. Once every possible area had been scoured, every witness re-interviewed at least twice, and no new physical evidence surfaced, the investigation slowed exactly the way missing person cases often do: gradually, quietly, then cold. By early 1984, the Jacob Merritt file was officially shifted to traditional long-term status, but the next steps hit dead ends almost immediately. Standard procedures of the era were followed: bank transactions traced, insurance checked, hospital records searched, neighboring counties contacted for any matching descriptions, all negative. No withdrawals, no purchases, no plane tickets, no admissions or deaths of any man fitting his description. A living man usually leaves a trail. Jacob left none. When police tried to reconstruct Jacob's final interactions in the week before he vanished, they found nothing suggesting he planned to leave town or was in serious trouble. Steady job, no debts, no major conflicts. Friends described him as quiet, no gambling, no ties to dangerous crowds, and most importantly, someone who would never disappear without telling anyone. Yet in March 1984, one event shook the investigation hard. A witness who had originally said he saw Jacob talking to the silver-haired man outside the Rusty Spur suddenly contacted police and asked to retract his statement, claiming he remembered wrong and wasn't sure it was even Jacob. The abrupt reversal raised red flags. This was the only mention of the silver-haired man, one of the few solid pieces from the night he vanished. When brought in for a new statement, the witness grew cagey, refused to describe the man's appearance or exact time, said he didn't want to be involved anymore, and walked out. No one could prove why he changed his story, but the retraction effectively killed the silver-haired man lead. One crucial piece of information gone, just like Jacob himself. Months later, rumors started circulating in the community. Some said Jacob skipped town for a new life. Others claimed land disputes or secret debts. None were backed by evidence, but in a small town like San Angelo, rumors travel faster than facts. Jacob's family pushed back, but couldn't stop the whispers. Police chased every tip they heard, yet no one produced anything solid. No witness saw Jacob leave Texas. No documents showed he tried to cover his tracks. No signs he planned to vanish. Still, the lack of results let those theories blur the case's seriousness for some locals. By 1986, with leads exhausted, police were left with a thin file, a handful of weak exhibits, and a string of disconnected traces that refused to form a complete story. No body, no clear suspect, no new credible statements, no progress since late 1983. Keeping the file active was no longer feasible. Internally, the lead investigator wrote bluntly, "High probability Jacob Merritt met with foul play, but insufficient elements to prove it or pursue a perpetrator." Final efforts from 1988, 1992 were largely formalities, recontacting witnesses, checking homeless records, reaching out to other states for matching missing persons. Results remained the same: nothing. At the end of 1992, more than 9 years after Jacob was last seen, the case was officially classified inactive missing person. That didn't mean police gave up entirely. It simply reflected the absence of anything new to work with. The file was sealed, placed in cold storage, and joined hundreds of other unsolved disappearances across Texas. For nearly 2 decades, Jacob Merritt's name all but vanished from active records, until a single bone found miles away years later forced the system to reopen a door everyone thought was sealed shut. Summer 1994, more than a decade after Jacob Merritt's file went inactive, an unexpected small event brought a flicker of light to a case everyone assumed was dead. Near noon, on a July day pushing 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a longtime local fisherman, named Carl Hitchens, was casting along a narrow stretch of river west of San Angelo, roughly 12 miles from where Jacob's truck had been found. The area was desolate, almost uninhabited, accessible only by a short dirt track. While looking for a new spot to drop bait, Carl noticed something wedged in the weeds right at the riverbank, half buried in dried mud, half exposed among sun-scorched grass. At first he thought it was trash, but when he bent down he realized it was a leather wallet. The leather was rotted, edges flaking, the clasp nearly disintegrated. Opening it released a musty smell and revealed only shredded paper remnants, proof it had been out in the elements for years. No money, no valuables, just a foggy plastic sleeve that once held an ID or driver's license. Though the writing was almost gone, Carl could still make out the last few letters: Merritt. He immediately wrapped the wallet in a plastic fishing bag and took it to the nearest station. When it was handed over, the duty detective froze. The name Merritt was unmistakable. The Jacob Merritt file had been dormant nearly 10 years, and this was the first piece of evidence to surface since 1983. The wallet was rushed to the lab and placed on the evidence table. The decayed leather was gently brushed for samples, but years of sun and weather had nearly destroyed the material. Paper remnants were long ruined by water and mud, no fingerprints, no direct identification possible. Still, investigators compared it to 1983 photos of Jacob's wallet in the old file. Size matched, stitching style matched, and though the ID text was gone, the plastic sleeve structure and faint remnants of the print matched Texas driver's licenses from that era. Forensically, it couldn't be declared 100%, but the probability it was Jacob's wallet was extremely high. What troubled everyone was the location 12 miles west of the original scene, near a stretch of river Jacob had no reason to visit, and completely detached from the route he walked that night. If this was truly his wallet, the biggest question was instant. Why was it here? Investigators noted three possibilities. 1. Jacob dropped it before disappearing, ruled out immediately. The wallet had never turned up in the truck or along the original search areas. 2. River current carried it, also unlikely. The section where it was found wasn't naturally connected to the disappearance site, and the flow wasn't strong enough to move a leather wallet miles and deposit it exactly there. 3. The one that silenced the room longest. Someone brought the wallet here, intentionally left it, accidentally dropped it, or it moved multiple times after Jacob vanished. Though no direct proof existed, the 1994 discovery stirred unease. The case's first new evidence wasn't near the original scene, but in a place no one expected, as if someone wanted to pull the investigation farther from where it began. The wallet solved nothing, but it asked an entirely new question, and more importantly, it forced police to reopen Jacob Merritt's file and look again at things time seemed to have buried. The wallet's appearance, 12+ miles away, prompted another reopening of Jacob's file in the late 1990s, but lack of manpower and technology kept review superficial. It wasn't until 2006, when the San Angelo PD switched to a new electronic storage system and was required to re-examine all long-cold missing person cases in the county, that Jacob Merritt's file was truly awakened a second time. The first thing the new generation of investigators did was digitize every old document, handwritten notes, typed reports, silver halide photographs, stored in yellowing folders. While scanning crime scene photos, a young technician noticed something almost everyone in 1983 had missed: a tire impression at the very bottom edge of one photo of the vacant lot where Jacob's Ford was found. The original picture was poorly angled and underexposed, the edge nearly black, but high-resolution scanning brought the faint detail into focus. It was a distinctive tread pattern, deep lugs, wider lateral grooves than the Ford F-100's tires. Stranger still, the pattern matched tires commonly used on early 1980s GMC pickups. By itself it proved nothing, but when cross-referenced with the dark fabric scrap found inside Jacob's cab in 1983, investigators started asking, why did both the fabric and the tire track point to the same type of vehicle, and why had no one in 1983 noticed? If someone driving a 1983-era GMC pickup was at the vacant lot the night Jacob vanished, and accidentally left both a tire print and upholstery fiber, why wasn't that connection documented? Deeper review revealed several traces in the original file had been downplayed or simply not fully evaluated due to the era's limitations: poor lighting, no dedicated crime scene photography rigs, no precise fiber analysis methods. No one had deliberately ignored them, but the oversight left a gaping hole. In 2006, a major change came. Texas officially linked all missing person files to NAMUS, the national database for cross-referencing unidentified remains. Jacob's profile was uploaded: height, weight, clothing description, distinguishing marks, and known evidence. Almost immediately, the system flagged 3 John Does in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona as possible matches. Detailed comparison ruled all 3 out: 1 wrong height, one old injury not in Jacob's medical history, one death outside Jacob's disappearance window. Though it yielded nothing, NAMUs at least confirmed no unidentified body, found in 2 decades, could be Jacob. That meant one chilling truth: either his remains had never been located, or someone hid them extremely well. Throughout 2006, the team rebuilt the timeline, rechecked every statement, and tried to link the 1994 wallet to the overlooked 1983 clues. Nothing fit. The wallet's distant location produced no new leads, no new witnesses, no new evidence, no forensic data strong enough to reopen as a criminal case. Tire track analysis only confirmed a GMC pickup had been present, hardly rare in 1980s Texas. Old vehicle records were a mess. Missing plates, incomplete owner info, most untraceable after so long. After hundreds of hours with no results, Jacob Merritt's case fell silent again. Everything circled back. A man vanished one night, left no trace, no accident evidence, no crime evidence, and a wallet somehow blown to a place no one understood. In 2006, an internal report added one line to the case summary: foul play not ruled out, but currently insufficient evidence for criminal investigation. And so for the second time in over 20 years, Jacob Merritt's file closed, cold mysteries intact. Early spring 2013, nearly 30 years after Jacob Merritt disappeared, West San Angelo suburbs began cleanup and surveys of abandoned oil fields, active in the 1960s, 70s. One old lease along Arden Road was scheduled for environmental remediation. The area was desolate, hundreds of acres of red dust, rusted derricks standing alone, wind whistling through tall weeds that hid old service trails. One April morning, a geological survey crew clearing around abandoned well #14 had a worker, Julio Ramirez, kick something hard under the dry soil. He thought it was scrap metal or wood, but when he bent down he saw it wasn't industrial debris. A long ivory-colored bone, covered in dust and plant fragments, half buried, half exposed. Instinct made Julio step back instantly. He called the crew to stop and phoned police. Within 2 hours the site was sealed. Investigators and a forensic anthropologist confirmed it was a human femur, nearly intact but heavily weathered. Soil adhesion showed recent wind erosion had exposed it, weeks or months, not fresh placement. That alone told the team this wasn't random or accidental. Careful excavation around the well found no other bones within 5 meters. The femur's isolation in an old oil field only deepened the strangeness. Someone had brought a body here and left part of it, or animals had scattered the rest years ago. Every possibility was on the table. The bone was rushed to the Tom Green County morgue for analysis. A state forensic anthropologist was brought in. From structure, length and surface condition, the expert determined it belonged to an adult male, likely 28-40, at death. Femur length estimated overall height, 5'8" to 5'10", a strong match for Jacob's recorded 5'9". Pulling Jacob's old profile, the anthropologist noted another key detail: Jacob had suffered a minor leg injury in a 1981 workplace accident that left a slight anterior bony callus. Remarkably, the recovered femur showed identical thickening in the same spot. Though not conclusive from bone alone, the findings screamed the obvious: this could be Jacob. It was the biggest break in 30 years, the first piece that might complete the story. Hope for quick DNA confirmation crashed fast. Modern STR analysis requires decent marrow. Texas weather had destroyed nearly all marrow in the bone. What remained was brittle, dry, and degraded. After 3 attempts, each taking nearly 2 weeks, the lab confirmed only fragmented, unusable DNA. No STR profile meant no CODIS or NamUs comparison. Identification stalled completely. A technician wrote plainly, DNA too degraded for identification profile. They had found a bone that strongly suggested Jacob, but couldn't prove it. Every hope pinned on 2013 DNA technology evaporated. No familial comparison possible. The bone, the only thing to surface in 30 years, stood mute. Still, investigators preserved it under special conditions, sealed and newly catalogued, hoping future tech might succeed. where 2013 failed. It was labeled a pending opportunity, neither excluded nor confirmed. The oil field was searched 2 more days, no more bones, no clothing, no personal items, no burial signs. As if someone long ago brought a body there, and time plus wind had scattered it, leaving one lone piece. Despite the new hope, the case advanced no further. The file was marked pending, insufficient DNA, and placed on watch. The lead investigator wrote one short line, very high probability, but unprovable at this time. No one imagined that very bone, powerless against 2013 technology, would years later become the key, when an entirely new method appeared, and changed everything. For years the 2013 femur sat in the evidence vault, a half-evidence, too important to discard, too incomplete to conclude. But in 2019, when Texas began a project re-examining old samples with upgraded microanalysis, the unknown victim's bone was sent back to the lab for non-DNA testing. And there, an astonishing connection emerged, one the 1983 investigators could never have imagined. While carefully cleaning the bone, a technician discovered a tiny dark blue fiber, less than 4 mm long, caught in the weathered surface near the femoral bulge. Under the microscope, it wasn't ordinary clothing fabric, it was synthetic upholstery fiber used in older vehicle seats. The find was immediately compared to the 1983 dark fabric scrap recovered from Jacob's truck cab. Though decades old, the original sample was still viable. Side-by-side electron microscope analysis left the lab stunned. The 2 fibers were identical. Same polymer structure, same dye, despite surface fading on the older sample. Same twist pattern characteristic of early 1980s automotive upholstery production. Both from seat cover material, used in 1983 GMC pickups, common among Texas ranchers and workers. Then younger techs couldn't believe this link had sat, unnoticed for over 30 years. Piece by piece a picture formed. Before Jacob disappeared, someone, or a struggle, occurred inside or near a 1983 GMC pickup. The fiber in Jacob's Ford proved his truck had direct or indirect contact with that GMC's interior. The fiber on the bone proved something far more damning. The body or body part had also contacted the exact same interior, meaning the same person, or the same GMC pickup, was present at both critical moments. The night Jacob vanished, fiber in Jacob's Ford, and when the body part was taken to the oil field, fiber on the bone. The scattered 1983 clues now formed a clearer path than ever. When the comparison report went up the chain, the new case detective, David Livingston, who joined San Angelo PD in 2016, immediately ordered retrieval of every registered 1983 GMC pickup owner in Tom Green County, around the time Jacob disappeared. It wasn't simple. 1980s vehicle records were chaotic. Many lost, many sold privately without re-registration, many scrapped or parted out off the books. Still, after nearly 3 weeks combing DMV files, registration documents, insurance records, and old repair receipts, the team narrowed an initial list of 52 owners. Many were quickly eliminated, deceased, moved away, or had ironclad alibis for 1983, 1986. Some trucks had been sold in Midland or Abilene, but remained in the search radius. Detective Livingston also demanded checks of old GMC parts records, because the perpetrator might not have been the registered owner, but someone who later bought the truck second or third hand. After more than a month of filtering, the final list was down to just 14 individuals in Tom Green County, who were linked to a 1983 GMC pickup at the time. Jacob disappeared, had no clear alibi, and could realistically access the vacant lot where Jacob's Ford was found. For the first time in decades, the Jacob Merritt case was no longer an invisible void. For the first time, police had a narrowed suspect pool, not vague theories, but one built on concrete physical evidence that tied 2 crime scenes, 3 decades apart, with a single type of upholstery fiber. Livingston stared at those 14 names and wrote one short line in the investigative file: "Start here." He knew, for the first time since 1983, The clues were no longer faint, they were all pointing the same way. A 1983 GMC, and one person who had kept the secret for 40 years. Narrowing the 1983 GMC owners to 14, by the end of 2019, marked the biggest breakthrough since Jacob Merritt vanished. But to go further, police needed definitive proof linking the unidentified remains directly to Jacob. The blue fiber had opened a promising path, but it was still circumstantial, not enough to declare the oil-field body Jacob. Only DNA could do that. Yet the 2013 STR attempt had failed completely. The unknown remains seemed destined to sit in storage for years more, until a brand new technology arrived at exactly the right moment and changed the case's entire trajectory. Late 2019, the state of Texas contracted an independent genetics lab to process severely degraded bone samples using next-generation sequencing under a project called Legacy Genome, targeting 1970s, 1990s cases that had failed STR testing. Among dozens of submissions, a technician randomly selected the 2013 oil field femur, the strongest candidate tied to Jacob Merritt's disappearance. From that moment, the bone's resurrection began. First step: whole genome amplification (WGA) to multiply whatever DNA fragments remained. This was a salvage operation. The marrow, the best DNA source, had been obliterated by over 30 years of Texas sun. Techs carefully drilled into the densest part of the femur, extracting about 40 milligrams of bone powder. The powder went through protein removal, demineralization, and recovery of any surviving microscopic DNA fragments. Every drop of purified solution was treated like gold. One tiny mistake could ruin everything. Surprisingly, after 3 days the system reported a DNA signal, weak, fragmented, broken, but present enough to move forward. Second phase, microarray genotyping using chips with hundreds of thousands of SNP markers. Unlike STR, which needs long DNA strands, SNPs can be read from segments as short as a few dozen bases, perfect for rotten bone. When the chip finished, it returned nearly 65,000 usable SNPs, lower than ideal, but enough to build a genetic profile. For the first time since 1983, the unknown body's DNA had a voice. From the raw data, the lab created an SNP profile suitable for genealogical analysis. The sample passed 3 quality checks: coverage, contamination, fragmentation, and was exported for upload to GEDmatch Pro, the platform U.S. agencies had used to crack hundreds of cold cases. When the file went live, the entire team held its breath. No one knew if any relatives had ever uploaded their DNA. No match meant back to zero. Minutes later, a notification popped up: 2 potential matches detected, second to fourth cousin range. 2 distant cousins appeared, people who knew nothing about the Jacob Merritt case. Each shared only 80s, 150 centimorgans, not enough for direct identification, but enough to start building a family tree. Within hours, genealogists traced backward through public trees, birth, marriage, and death records. Because the matches were distant, the common ancestor was far back. 1920s, 1930s, when the lines first split. The first solid lead, both matches tied to a large family living in Tom Green County from the 1940s, 1960s. From there, genealogists built a massive tree of over 300 individuals spanning nearly a century. After pruning branches that had moved away or died out, only 4 family lines remained in the San Angelo area at the time Jacob vanished. One of those lines was the Merritt family. When Merritt appeared on the tree, Detective Livingston felt his chest tighten. This was no coincidence. Both distant matches led to the same surname, Merritt, and within that line, only one adult male had vanished without a trace. After 1983, Jacob Merritt. Genealogy couldn't declare the bone was Jacob's, but it proved the undeniable: the 2013 remains belonged to someone in the direct Merritt bloodline. When the report reached the department, Livingston called an emergency meeting. He knew the genealogical match was only step 1, but it was enough to shift the case from missing person to suspected homicide. That unlocked new search warrants, reopened the suspect list, and reactivated investigative steps frozen for over 30 years. The lab recommended the next step: direct reference samples from Jacob's immediate family for deeper kinship analysis. The family agreed instantly. A living male cousin provided blood. Results weren't instant, but the picture was already clear. The unknown SNP profile matched the merit line across multiple branches. In the official report, Livingston wrote one line: "Though not fully verified yet, probability the remains are Jacob Merritt is extremely high." For the first time since 1983, the case was no longer "Where is Jacob?" It was now, "Who killed Jacob? And why was his body taken to the oil field?" This was the turning point that would eventually lead straight to the killer's identity, and in just a few more years would shock all of San Angelo like nothing before. The genealogical evidence proving the 2013 bone likely belonged to the Merritt bloodline completely changed the case's direction, but for official identification, police needed near absolute proof of direct male line descent. So in early 2020 they performed the final test, Y-DNA analysis, focusing on the Y chromosome passed almost unchanged from father to son for generations. Jacob's family, after decades without hope, finally felt the truth might surface. Jacob's only living direct male line cousin agreed to provide a sample. It was sent to the Texas State Lab and compared against the tiny amount of Y-DNA recovered from the degraded bone, something neither 1983 nor 2013 technology could have touched. Extraction was done in a clean room under strict conditions. One contaminating molecule could ruin everything. The bone was reground, demineralized, and bound to a special polymer to rescue the shortest possible Y-DNA fragments. Techs knew failure was possible at any second, but when the final analysis ran, the numbers on the screen made everyone jump. Y-DNA match between the bone and Jacob's cousin, 99.98%. A near absolute figure, a conclusion virtually beyond dispute. That was the moment the femur found in the abandoned oil field in 2013 was officially declared Jacob Merritt. 37 years after the night he vanished, his identity was finally returned. Time of death estimate, 1983 to 1986, with identity confirmed. The next critical question was, when did Jacob die? This would rebuild the timeline and point to the killer and motive. The state anthropologist examined the bone structure in detail. Markers showed long burial but not deep mineralization typical of decades underground. Microfractures, weathering, and mineral fading all indicated the body began open-air exposure no earlier than 1986, meaning Jacob most likely died in 1983, the year he disappeared. But the body was not at the oil field for 30 years. It only began surfacing or eroding around 1986, 1987. To confirm the window, forensics analyzed soil trapped in microscopic bone crevices. Unlike 1983, 2020 technology allowed ultra-precise soil geology. Mineral content revealed two distinct layers. 1. Older soil with sediment similar to the Concho Valley region. 2. Newer soil matching the oil field area, only present the last few years before discovery. This proved something shocking. Jacob's body had been buried somewhere else first, then moved to the oil field. Rainwater and erosion analysis, the horrifying clue in an internal briefing. Forensics presented a chilling analysis, based on surface erosion patterns specific to West Texas wind and rain. The body was likely placed at the oil field between 1985 and 1986. The conclusion rested on three factors. 1. Erosion pattern light, even wear and red dust dispersion typical of at least 20-25 years of strong Texas winds. If the bone had been there since 1983, erosion would be far heavier. 2. Precipitation staining surface discoloration showed only about 25-30 seasons of rain and sun, matching placement a few years after Jacob vanished. 3. Soil layering. Older embedded soil proved the body lay elsewhere for some time before being dug up and relocated. All of it led to one horrifying conclusion: this was not a one-time body dump. Whoever killed Jacob came back, exhumed him, and moved him. One of the most disturbing discoveries in the entire case. Jacob wasn't just murdered. His killer later dug him up, transported him to a new site, and let time and nature erase the evidence. No one moves a body without reason. It usually happens when the killer fears discovery of the original grave, or a change in residence, construction, or access threatens the site, or the killer wants to mislead investigators by placing remains far from the crime scene. In the special briefing after the results were released, Detective Livingston stood before the newly updated timeline and felt the entire case shift. Jacob Merritt did not simply disappear from San Angelo in 1983. He was killed. His body was buried, then dug up, then taken to the abandoned oil field by a killer who knew exactly what he was doing. The biggest question: why move the body? That question haunted the team for weeks. The perpetrator didn't just kill, he was calm enough to return to the grave, exhume the body, and relocate it. This insight narrowed the suspect pool in an unexpected way. The person had to live or work near the original burial site, had to know the abandoned oil field, and believe no one would go there, had to feel safe moving a body without being seen, and most crucially, had to have the right vehicle, a 1983 GMC pickup. The list of 14 GMC owners was no longer abstract. It had become a map to the killer. The Y-DNA result didn't just identify the remains, it reignited the entire investigation, unlocking dozens of new search warrants, witness re-interviews, and pushing the Jacob Merritt case into its most critical phase since 1983. Livingston wrote one short line at the end of the report, capturing the weight of the discovery: the man who killed Jacob came back a second time, and that's how we're going to find him. Once Y-DNA confirmed the oil field bone was Jacob Merritt's, the team's next goal was to locate the original burial site, because the bone carried two distinct soil layers, the deep older layer and the newer oil field layer. Forensic geologists believed they could trace the older soil signature back to the first grave. It was extremely difficult, but not impossible. Starting in 2020, Texas partnered with a specialized soil forensics lab in New Mexico, using FTIR spectroscopy, soil mineral mapping, and pollen microanalysis to identify each location's unique mineral fingerprint. Every speck of dirt carries a one-of-a-kind combination of minerals, pollen, and trace elements shaped by local geology, water flow, vegetation, fertilizers, and nearby agriculture, like DNA for soil. When the forensic team extracted individual soil particles from deep within the microscopic crevices of Jacob's bone, the analysis revealed three primary minerals. 1. Montmorillonite, a clay dominant in the blackland soils of West Texas. 2. Olivine, a rare mineral found only at a handful of old quarry sites around San Angelo. 3. Abnormally high nitrate levels, indicating prolonged exposure to manure or livestock areas. Combined, these three created a geological recipe that existed in very few places in Tom Green County. When the county-wide mineral map was run against the bone sample, the result made the entire team bolt upright. Only one location in the entire county matched the soil signature at 95%. That location, Briscoe Ranch, a privately owned 400-acre spread about 18 miles outside San Angelo. The name hit like a punch to the chest, not because it was unfamiliar, but because Briscoe had appeared in the original 1983 file and been cleared early due to an alibi and a witness who later recanted. Geological breakthrough: the original burial site. Upon receiving the 95% soil match, Detective Livingston immediately ordered deeper soil stratigraphy cross-checking. The soil embedded in the bone showed three distinct layers: topsoil, black clay, and a high nitrate microlayer, exactly the profile that builds up over decades in old livestock waste pits. Briscoe Ranch had three abandoned manure pits from the 1970s, used for collecting waste and runoff, before modern plumbing was installed. Those pits possessed a nitrate profile that matched Jacob's bone sample perfectly. Land records were pulled. When Briscoe Ranch's geological map was overlaid with the bone soil signature, the original burial location practically materialized: an old manure pit on the north side of the ranch, only 600 meters from the main house. No other spot in the entire county came anywhere close to that level of match. What this means: if Jacob's bone carried soil unique to Briscoe Ranch, it meant The body had once been buried on Briscoe Ranch. This was the first burial site, before it was exhumed between 1985, 1986 and moved to the oil field. The killer had access to the ranch during those years. The killer was confident enough to bury a body on his own land, and later dig it up when necessary. No one does that except the ranch owner or someone he completely trusted. Harold Briscoe's 1983 statement. Beginning to crack. Harold Briscoe had been interviewed in 1983 for one simple reason. He owned a dark green 1983 GMC pickup that loosely matched a now retracted witness description. At the time, Briscoe claimed he never left the ranch the night Jacob vanished. Someone reportedly saw his truck parked in the yard. With no hard evidence, police moved on. Now, in 2020, that alibi no longer held water. When Livingston reviewed Briscoe's file, he spotted something previously overlooked. The alibi had been provided by a ranch foreman employed from 1987, a foreman who had since died and could never be re-interviewed. With the soil forensics results in hand, one question loomed large. Why did soil found only on Briscoe Ranch end up on Jacob's bone, when Briscoe swore he had never even met Jacob? A direct contradiction. Geological mapping. A match that sent chills. The team built a 3D model of Briscoe Ranch using soil data, 40 years of NOAA rainfall records, Landsat satellite imagery, and old aerial photos. After 3 days of processing, the model highlighted a single focal point. Jacob's body had been buried approximately 15 meters from the old manure pit, at a depth of 60-70 centimeters. The precision was staggering. Soil compaction matched the bone sample. Nitrate levels, 93% match. Montmorillonite, 96%. Olivine, 91%. A statistical near impossibility. Not coincidence. Not theory. Physical evidence. The killer's pattern was clear. Quick burial in ranch soil. Wait a few years. Dig up when risk appeared. Relocate to an oil field. No one would ever connect. Briscoe officially becomes suspect. #1. The facts were undeniable. Briscoe owned a 1983 GMC fiber match. Briscoe owned the ranch soil match. Briscoe claimed he never left the ranch, directly contradicted by DNA and soil forensics. Briscoe alone had unrestricted access to both the original burial site and the authority to dig up and move a body. Livingston pinned Briscoe's photo to the investigation board and drew red lines connecting the blue upholstery fiber, the GMC tire track, the soil match, the original burial location, the final dump site, the contradictory statements, a web that made him shudder. There was no longer any doubt the case pointed to one man. The question was no longer, how did Jacob die? It was, how long had Harold Briscoe hidden the crime, and why did he move the body? Answers would come when they searched the old GMC, the ranch outbuildings, and whatever Briscoe had left behind over 40 years. From this point forward, the case was no longer cold. It became the clearest manhunt San Angelo had ever seen. Once soil, fiber and DNA all pointed in the same direction, Harold Briscoe was no longer just one of the 1983 GMC owners. He became the central suspect in the entire investigation. To Detective Livingston, Briscoe's emergence wasn't shocking. What shocked him was that the man had been inside the suspect radius since 1983, yet the system had essentially ignored him for 4 decades. Briscoe owned a 400-plus acre ranch in the dry country west of San Angelo. Everyone who ever dealt with him described a quiet, hard-to-read man. Not friendly, but not a troublemaker either. In the 1983 file, he had been questioned because he drove a dark green 1983 GMC pickup, matching the fiber found in Jacob's truck, but the witness recanted, and the ranch foreman's alibi held, so police moved on. For years afterward, Briscoe lived quietly, never in legal trouble, but now, with the case rebuilt by modern science, Livingston looked at Briscoe's name in a completely different light. To ensure suspicion wasn't based solely on physical coincidences, the team re-examined the entire timeline of the night of September 29, 1983. Thanks to a digitized 2008 archive of old gas station security footage, San Angelo PD had access to tapes recorded decades earlier. One camera sat about 3 miles from the rusty spur, on a road Briscoe claimed he never used that night. When Livingston asked technicians to restore the footage from 12:45, 1:30 a.m., what appeared on screen silenced the room. Under the grainy glow of an analog camera, a dark 1983 GMC pickup pulled up briefly to the station entrance. Resolution was too low for a plate, but body style and color were unmistakable. The truck didn't fuel up, it paused only seconds, then turned toward the vacant lot, exactly where Jacob's Ford was later found. Most damning, the GMC appeared at 1:17 a.m., precisely the window when Jacob left the bar, and vanished on the road to the Concho River. Worse, Briscoe had sworn he went to bed early and never left the ranch. That old tape destroyed his statement. It couldn't be proven beyond doubt that the truck on camera was Briscoe's, but it added one more perfect piece to the puzzle. A 1983 GMC in the right place, at the right time, heading the right direction. 1983 Work Journal. Evidence no one expected. One of the most critical steps was obtaining a search warrant for Briscoe Ranch, but before that, Livingston wanted every scrap of information possible. He and his assistant combed through Briscoe's historical records, tax files, ranch permits, employment paperwork from the 1970s, 1990s. While digging through old county court storage, they found a box tied to a property insurance registration Briscoe filed in October 1983. The documents themselves were routine, but inside the box was something that made everyone stop. A small worn leather-bound notebook, marked 1983 in the corner. It was Briscoe's ranch work journal, notes on equipment maintenance, livestock tasks, winter planning. The early pages were completely ordinary: pump repairs, feed deliveries. But on the page for September 9, 1983, a single scrawled faded line stood out. 9/9, too much trouble. No explanation, no context, no names. Just an ambiguous note, written exactly 2 weeks before Jacob disappeared. Livingston felt the hair on his neck rise. The entry had no explicit meaning, but in an investigation, any cryptic note tied to timing can become a key. Too much trouble. Trouble with what? With whom? Why write it right before a man suddenly vanished? The journal was sent to forensics for handwriting scan and ink dating. Results confirmed. Ink matched common formulations used 1982, 1984. Writing pressure matched Briscoe's known samples from public documents. No evidence of later addition. No one claimed it was direct proof of murder, but it was enough to build a chilling suspicion. Briscoe was dealing with too much trouble right before Jacob vanished, and the two events might be connected. Mismatched statements, and everything points to Briscoe. The team began reconstructing Briscoe's timeline. Briscoe said he never left the ranch that night. The camera said a 1983 GMC appeared near the scene exactly when Jacob vanished. The fibers said the GMC's upholstery contacted both Jacob's truck and his remains. Soil forensics said the body was first buried on Briscoe Ranch. The final dump site said someone moved the body years later. DNA said the bone is Jacob. Piece by piece, they formed a single, unmistakable shape. Harold Briscoe was no longer just someone who happened to own a 1983 GMC. He was the only person in all of Tom Green County who had a reason to encounter the victim, the exact vehicle, a viable burial location, physical evidence linking both the first and final scenes. Detective Livingston looked at the evidence board and wrote the coldest, heaviest note in the entire file. Briscoe is no longer a suspect, he is the center of the criminal act. When the suspect begins to emerge digging deeper, the team uncovered more. In 1983, Briscoe and Jacob had argued over the potential sale of a small parcel next to Briscoe's ranch. The deal fell through, and old statements claimed the two men were overheard arguing at a gas station. If that was the original motive, a minor land dispute, it didn't explain exhuming and relocating the body years later, but it provided context. Briscoe did know Jacob. His 1983 claim of never meeting the man instantly became a lie. And every lie in a murder case is a red flag. The picture was now clearer than ever. Motive, opportunity, means location. Physical evidence, only one piece was still missing: proof Jacob's death was not accidental. That answer lay inside the old GMC pickup and in the abandoned outbuildings on Briscoe Ranch. One search warrant, and 40 years of truth would finally surface. Once every investigative thread pointed at Harold Briscoe, Detective Livingston knew the next move had to be the most direct yet. Search the 1983 GMC pickup, the vehicle at the heart of every suspicion. A truck can be washed, reupholstered, recarpeted, but time and modern forensics can reveal traces no one ever imagined would survive. With the soil match, fiber match, and gas station timeline in hand, a Tom Green County judge signed an emergency search warrant. On a stifling June morning, a convoy of police vehicles rolled onto Briscoe Ranch. Briscoe stood on the porch, eyes ice cold but betraying a flicker of unease. He was forced to unlock the barn, where the GMC had sat motionless for over a decade, coated in red dust, thick as desert sand. The metal doors groaned open. In the shadows, the GMC emerged like a ghost from the 80s. Body rusted, windows clouded, but the interior, investigators noticed immediately, was not entirely original. Parts of the rear bench still wore the factory dark blue upholstery, the exact upholstery that had left fibers in Jacob's truck and on Jacob's bone. Forensic vacuum, recovering fibers. After 40 years, the lab deployed a forensic vacuum with ultrafine biofilters capable of capturing fibers, dead skin cells, hair, and organic dust, invisible to the naked eye. The rear seat was vacuumed inch by inch. The machine hummed softly, pulling decades of debris into the filter. 2 hours later, a technician opened the filter under a microscope. No one dared breathe. Then they saw it, and the room went silent. A pale beige fiber, cotton poly blend, weave pattern typical of early 1980s men's shirts. The sample was sent for comparison against the 1983 evidence, photos and fabric descriptions provided by Jacob's family. Results returned in 3 days. Fiber structure, twist, polyester ratio, all matched the type of shirt Jacob regularly wore. It couldn't be declared 100% the exact shirt from the night he vanished. But the match was overwhelming. The rear seat of Briscoe's GMC, where he had insisted no one outside my family ever sat, contained a fiber matching the clothing of the man who disappeared on September 29, 1983. Luminol, the truth beneath the new carpet. The GMC's interior looked cleaner than expected. Seats not too dusty, cabin carpet apparently replaced in the 1990s. That alone raised Livingston's suspicion. Why would a frugal man like Briscoe, who hadn't invested in the truck in decades, replace the carpet in the late 80s or early 90s, exactly when Jacob's body was moved? The team sprayed luminol, the chemiluminescent blood reagent, across the metal floor beneath the carpet. Briscoe stood outside the barn, arms crossed, trying to stay calm, but when the UV light came on, his face twitched. Seconds after spraying, faint blue glow appeared, weak, faded, but unmistakable. A technician tapped the carpet, stain pattern under here. When the carpet was fully lifted, under black light the entire team froze. An irregular, elongated glow stretched from the rear passenger door, almost to the front seat. Not small drips or animal blood, not random splatter. A long smeared dragging pattern, consistent with a heavy object, likely a human body, being pulled into the cab from the right rear door. Back, head or shoulders may have scraped hard across the metal floor. Even though DNA was long destroyed, the pattern remained intact. The forensic tech spoke the words Livingston would never forget. No usable DNA, but this trace shows the vehicle was used to transport a human body. Not cargo, not livestock, not inanimate weight, a human corpse. Why luminol matters so much because it corroborated everything that came before. Jacob's shirt fiber on the GMC rear seat, GMC upholstery fiber in Jacob's truck, and on Jacob's bone. Soil match first burial on Briscoe's ranch. Camera timeline GMC at the disappearance site. Luminol drag, pattern proof, a body was inside the truck. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Jacob Merritt's body was dragged into the rear of Harold Briscoe's GMC, the night he vanished. No more possibility, no more theory, No more speculation. This was behavioral evidence, nearly impossible for any defense attorney to dismiss. How did Briscoe explain it? When asked about the luminol, Briscoe replied only, "Old truck, I used to haul small livestock, could be leftover blood, but the team had already tested, animal blood does not produce that kind of elongated drag pattern. No long smears, no pooling shape, no trace matching a heavy body dragged across bare metal. Moreover, luminol reacts differently to different animal blood. This reaction matched none of the recorded profiles." In other words, Briscoe was lying. Again, even without DNA. Investigators knew usable DNA, after 40 years in Texas heat and dust, was impossible. But in modern forensics, pattern evidence can sometimes be stronger than DNA. What they had: Nitsch's Jacobs clothing fiber, GMC rear seat, GMC upholstery fiber, Jacobs truck, Jacobs bone, drag marks inside the GMC cab, luminol, pattern only produced when a body is pulled into a vehicle, slight rear seat sagging consistent with adult human weight, carpet replaced in 1986, exactly when the body was moved. Everything formed one straight line. Briscoe's GMC was the vehicle used to transport Jacob Merritt's body. Finally, suspicion becomes certainty. After the search concluded, Livingston wrote in the final report, "No usable DNA, but everything else says the same thing. Jacob Merritt was in this GMC, alive or dead. For a 40-year-old cold case, establishing presence and intent matters more than any single DNA profile." And now the team knew for certain they held the single most critical piece, the crime vehicle. Only one step remained: direct, irrefutable evidence of guilt. And that step lay with the man himself, Harold Briscoe, who had hidden the truth for nearly 4 decades. After searching the 1983 GMC and recovering traces that could not be explained by coincidence, Detective Livingston knew it was time to sit across from Harold Briscoe for the first time in almost 40 years. No more casual 1983 interviews. This was a head-on confrontation backed by modern forensic science Harold could never have foreseen. And like most people who have lived in the dark too long, his story began to crumble piece by piece, each fragment knocked loose by fresh evidence. First statement: I never met Jacob. The first interview took place in San Angelo PD's interview room 2. Briscoe sat opposite Livingston, arms folded, acting as if none of this concerned him. When asked about the night of September 29, 1983, Briscoe repeated his old claim, "I never met that man." His voice was slow and firm, as if he had rehearsed the sentence for decades. But Livingston was ready. He slid a printout of the 1983 gas station camera, still across the table. Low resolution, but a dark GMC at the exact time and place was undeniable. Briscoe's brow furrowed slightly when he saw it. That was all, but the air shifted. Livingston said calmly, "We're not asking if you were driving the truck in the photo. We're only asking, do you still maintain you never met Jacob Merritt?" Briscoe was silent for several seconds, then exhaled. "Maybe, I ran into him somewhere. I don't remember clearly." That was the first statement to crack. Second statement: "We met, but I didn't give Jacob a ride." The second interview took place 2 days later. This time Briscoe was visibly tense. His lawyer had clearly told him to say as little as possible, but Livingston kept laying out evidence. This time the pale beige fiber found in the GMC's rear seat, that matched the fabric of Jacob's shirts. "You said you never put Jacob in your truck," Livingston said, "yet we found a fiber matching Jacob's shirt in the back seat of your GMC." Briscoe swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the floor for the first time. He answered in a low, halting voice, "All right, I did see him that day, but I didn't take him anywhere. We talked for a minute in the parking lot, and went our separate ways." That was the second statement, completely contradicting the first, and it would crumble at the next meeting. Third statement: "I drove him a short way." The third interview came right after the luminol revealed the drag pattern inside the cab. Livingston knew this would be the decisive confrontation. They now had a pattern proving a body had been pulled into the truck. When the fluorescing photo of the stain pattern was placed on the table, Briscoe went pale. He stared at the glowing smear for a long time, as if hoping it wasn't real. Livingston folded his arms. You said you didn't take Jacob anywhere, but the drag mark shows a body was pulled into your truck. Briscoe's hands trembled slightly. Then he drew a deep breath, and the room fell into a thick silence before he delivered the third statement. Okay, I gave him a ride, just a short ride. He said he was tired. Livingston said nothing. He just watched Briscoe. The man across from him was convicting himself with every word, and like most liars in a panic, Briscoe didn't realize that changing his story was the clearest sign of guilt. Fourth statement. I let him out near Arden Bridge. The fourth interview was the last, and the one that made the entire team realize Briscoe had buried himself. Livingston brought in the Briscoe Ranch map, the soil forensics overlay, and the exact location where the dirt matched the sample on Jacob's bone. He laid the map in front of Briscoe. You said you drove Jacob a short way. Where exactly? Briscoe licked his lips, thought for a few seconds, then answered, near Arden Bridge. I dropped him off there. That's all. That was the fourth statement, and it was catastrophically wrong. Livingston placed two more photos on the table. One, the 3D soil match model showing a 95% hit on Briscoe Ranch. 2. The old manure pit, where the body was first buried. You say you let Jacob out near Arden Bridge, Livingston said slowly, but Jacob's body could never have been at Arden Bridge, because the soil on his bone only exists in one place, your ranch. Briscoe went dead silent. Not ordinary silence, the silence of a man backed into a corner with no exit. His lawyer started to object, but Livingston kept going without pause. If Jacob got out near Arden Bridge, why does his bone carry soil unique to your old manure pit? Why was his body buried on your ranch before it was dug up and moved to the oil field? Briscoe stared at the table. His shoulders shook slightly. No answer came. No one spoke, but everyone in the room knew Briscoe had been caught in his own lie. Statements collapsing with each piece of evidence. 4 statements. 4 completely different stories. 1. Never met Jacob. Destroyed by the gas station camera. 2. Met, but didn't drive him. Destroyed by Jacob's shirt fiber in the rear seat. 3. Drove him a short way. Destroyed by the luminol drag pattern. 4. Dropped him near Arden Bridge. Destroyed by soil forensics pointing only to Briscoe Ranch. Briscoe's story changed every time evidence he didn't know existed was revealed. That is the classic reaction of a guilty man trying to reshape his lie to fit what's been discovered, and each adjustment only made the story more illogical. Livingston reported to his superiors, Briscoe is incriminating himself by the way he reacts to the evidence. End of the interviews. A suspect with no way out. After the final interview, Briscoe was allowed to leave. There was no arrest warrant yet, but Livingston knew it was only a matter of time. Briscoe walked out of the room slowly, shoulders heavy, as if 40 years of lies were finally crushing his aging frame. The investigation team knew they were inches from the truth. The truth lay not just in the statements, but in how completely they collapsed. No innocent person needs to change their story 4 times. No innocent person has burial soil on a victim's bone. No innocent person has a body drag pattern in their truck. From this point, the case entered an irreversible phase, preparing the arrest warrant for Harold Briscoe. Once Harold Briscoe's statements collapsed under the weight of evidence, Detective Livingston knew one more strong witness, one credible, powerful account, would seal a criminal indictment. And then that piece appeared in a way no one could have predicted from a man who had lived in silence far too long. An unexpected call. I need to talk. 3 days after the 4th interview, Livingston received a call from an elderly man. His voice shook, but carried the gravity of someone who had thought long and hard before dialing. My name is Floyd Hanley. I worked on Briscoe Ranch in the 70s and 80s. I need to talk to you about September 1983. Those words made Livingston sit bolt upright. He arranged to meet Floyd in a private conference room at the station, and 2 hours later a frail, ash-white-haired man using a cane walked in. Floyd Hanley, 80 years old, a ranch hand at Briscoe Ranch for 22 years. His employment record had surfaced briefly in 1983 files, but he had never been considered a key witness. He had stayed silent for nearly 4 decades, until now. First account. I saw him digging a hole. When asked why he was speaking after 40 years, Floyd sighed and clasped his weathered hands. Because I don't have much time left. I figured, it's better to tell the truth before I close my eyes. Livingston opened his notebook, ready to record every word. Floyd began, voice slow but clear. That night, around midnight, I was out by the Old North Corral checking a water line because a calf was acting restless. Then, I saw Harold's truck lights shining on the ground. He didn't see me. Livingston asked, "What was he doing?" Floyd looked down, old hands trembling slightly. He was digging a hole, a big hole, not a trash pit, not a livestock grave, and he was digging fast, like a man scared of being caught. The room went airless. That was the exact location soil forensics had pinpointed, the north side old manure pit area. Livingston pressed, "Are you certain it was late September 1983? Floyd nodded firmly. "I remember it clear, because the next day Harold told me to take the day off, something he never did. He told me to stay away from the north side of the ranch for a few days." Second account, land rumors. Conflict with Jacob. Livingston knew a hole alone wasn't conclusive. He needed motive. And Floyd became the first person to directly confirm what old files only hinted at, the land dispute between Jacob and Harold Briscoe. "Did Jacob ever come to the ranch?" Livingston asked. Floyd tilted his head slightly, then answered immediately. "Yes, I saw him talking to Harold about 3 weeks before he disappeared. They were arguing hard. I didn't hear everything, but I caught words. Money, not fair, I ain't signing." The hair rose on Livingston's neck. That was the perfect missing motive piece. Jacob wanted to buy a strip of ranch land. Briscoe refused to sell. The two men argued. One vanished shortly after. Livingston continued, "During that argument, did you see anyone threaten anyone?" Floyd shook his head. "No threats I heard, but I saw Harold's face, real angry. Angrier than I'd ever seen him." Final account. "I saw something in a sack." This was the part that made everyone in the room hold their breath. When Livingston asked if Floyd saw anyone else on the ranch that night, the old man frowned, dragging the memory back from 37 years ago. "No other person, but about an hour after I saw him digging, I saw Harold dragging something long heavy, wrapped in a burlap sack." Livingston's grip tightened on his pen. "You're sure?" Floyd nodded hard. "I couldn't see clear, but the shape, it wasn't feed, it wasn't tools. It looked like a body. I never said anything, because I was scared. Scared of Harold. He could be mean when he was mad." In the 2020 forensic report, Jacob's body had been placed in a shallow grave, matching Floyd's account perfectly, and the body being wrapped in burlap aligned with the nitrate-rich soil and synthetic fiber residue on the bone. An 80-year-old man's testimony had just shattered the wall Briscoe had built for nearly 40 years, not just because of what he said, but because Floyd had zero reason to lie. No remaining ties to Briscoe, no gain from the case, only one wish at his age: peace before he died. Soil forensics plus testimony equals perfect match. The team cross-checked Floyd's account against the science. Floyd said Briscoe dug on the north side. Soil match confirmed the exact area. Floyd said shallow hole erosion pattern matched the exposure timeline. Floyd said burlap sack fiber residue on the bone showed contact with synthetic burlap weave. Floyd said Briscoe worked frantically that night. 1985, 1986 relocation timeline fit a panicked cover-up. Nothing contradicted the science. Everything lined up perfectly. Livingston knew from that moment the case had moved from suspicion to conclusion. Briscoe was no longer just a suspect, he was the perpetrator, almost certainly. The 80-year-old witness's final words before leaving the room. Floyd turned back, voice low and sad. "I lived my whole life with that haunting me. Every time I looked north on the ranch, I knew something wasn't right. Now I've said it. I hope Jacob's soul can rest." The room fell silent. Livingston wrote the final line in the witness report. Floyd Hanley's testimony aligns perfectly with timeline soil analysis and offender behavioral model. Recommend immediate arrest warrant for Harold Briscoe. This was no longer a cold case. It was a case about to explode, and San Angelo had no idea the biggest shock was still coming. Once Floyd Hanley's statement was entered into the file and analyzed alongside the soil forensics, luminol stains, fibers, and reconstructed timeline, the Jacob Merritt case crossed the point of no return. Detective Livingston knew the moment had come. They had motive, means, opportunity, an eyewitness, and most crucially, a 40-year chain of physical evidence, all pointing to one man, Harold Briscoe. The arrest warrant packet was prepared in 48 hours, 163 pages, 54 photographs of evidence, 21 forensic reports. The case went to Tom Green County District Judge Ellen Whitford, known for her caution in major criminal matters. She reviewed the file through a sleepless night, and the next morning she put pen to paper and signed the order San Angelo had waited 40 years for. Approved, arrest warrant for Harold Briscoe, charge murder first degree, with intent to conceal a body. When the red seal hit the final page, Livingston knew it wasn't just a signature. It was the beginning of the biggest shock in the town's modern history. The arrest, 6:40 a.m. A morning no one will ever forget. That morning, the Texas sky was a flat, heavy gray, as if nature itself knew the day was different. The police convoy rolled onto Briscoe Ranch at 6:40 a.m. No sirens, no lights. They didn't want a spectacle, but what was about to happen was a spectacle in every sense of the word. Briscoe was standing on the porch holding a coffee cup when he saw the officers step out of their vehicles. His calm lasted only seconds. Livingston read the warrant. Harold Briscoe, you are under arrest for first-degree murder and removal of a corpse, with intent to conceal a crime. Briscoe took one step back. His mouth opened as if to speak, but nothing came out. His hands shook slightly before the cuffs went on. He had lived his entire life on this vast, powerful piece of land, but in that moment, Harold Briscoe was just an old man with nowhere left to run. Ranch search, and the new bombshell, evidence after the arrest. The search team went straight to the back barn where the GMC had been found. They had already processed the truck, but not the entire building. Near one corner, under an old brown tarp, a forensic tech uncovered a disassembled seat frame. The upholstery was almost rotted away, but what remained was unmistakable. 1983 dark blue factory cloth. A small section was cut and placed under the microscope. The result was immediate and exact. It was the identical upholstery that left fibers in Jacob's truck and fibers on Jacob's bone. The fibers in Jacob's truck and on the bone were not just similar type, they were confirmed to be from the same production batch. Something that can only happen if both contacted the exact same seat, or the exact same GMC. The discarded seat frame was the very piece Briscoe had tried to destroy, never imagining it would still be sitting in his own barn, like a hook dragging him back to the crime scene. Evidence the killer thought time had disguised became the strongest proof against him. Details no one expected. The old seat closes the story. When Livingston looked at the seat frame, he understood instantly. The seat had been replaced to hide traces of Jacob ever being inside the truck. The old seat was hidden, not thrown away. The fabric matched perfectly at both scenes, Jacob's truck and Jacob's bone. This proved one undeniable fact. Briscoe's GMC was where Jacob was dragged in, possibly already dead or dying. No DNA, no problem. Mechanical traces and batch match production were enough to convince any jury. The final hours before indictment, Briscoe was taken to the station and placed in holding cell 4. He did not immediately ask for a lawyer. He did not fight. He just sat quietly, staring at his trembling hands, as if he knew the life he had built was gone. Meanwhile, the team finalized the charging documents. The indictment included murder in the first degree, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, failure to report a death, obstruction of justice. In the summary report, Livingston wrote, Harold Briscoe did not just kill Jacob Merritt. He tried to erase his very existence for 40 years. Science would no longer allow it. San Angelo community, shocked when the news broke. San Angelo seemed to stop for hours. Briscoe was a big name locally, ranch owner, ag council donor, a familiar face at Texas fairs. No one could believe a man who had lived in quiet respectability could hide something so horrific, but the truth was undeniable. An innocent man had vanished. A killer had walked free for 40 years, and justice late had finally arrived. The Jacob Merritt case had entered its most important chapter, putting Harold Briscoe on trial. The trial of Harold Briscoe, May 2026. The trial began in May 2026, nearly 3 years after Jacob Merritt's bone was positively identified. Though it was a prosecution for a crime more than 4 decades old, the Tom Green County courtroom was packed. Press, victim's family, and elderly San Angelo residents, who still remembered the night of September 29, 1983, like an open wound. The atmosphere was thick, taut as wire. Everyone understood this was not just the trial of one man. It was proof that modern science can crack even the deepest buried secrets. Prosecution opening. 40 years of buried truth. Lead prosecutor Melissa Hart stood and spoke with calm power. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is no longer about guesswork. It is not about one person's word against another's. This is a story told by science, and science does not lie. She laid out clearly what the trial would show: forensic work unprecedented in Tom Green County history, an unbreakable chain of physical evidence, 4 decades of concealment that could not survive DNA and soil forensics. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear pens scratching on notepads. Soil match. DART never lies. First witness, Dr. Marta Levesque, soil forensics expert from the New Mexico State Lab. She placed a 3D model on the stand, showing the soil layers inside Jacob's femur. Behind her, a giant screen displayed the mineral map of the entire county. Dr. Levesque stated, "The deep soil embedded in the victim's femur has a mineral signature that exists at only one location within a 50-mile radius, Briscoe Ranch." She explained each component: Montmorillonite, from the black clay layer; rare weathered olivine; extremely high nitrate unique to old manure pits; a 95% match, statistically conclusive. When the side-by-side comparison of bone soil and ranch map appeared, the courtroom murmured. This was not circumstantial, it was nature's fingerprint, impossible to fake, hide, or deny. Fiber match. Fibers tell the truth. Forensic textile expert Professor Rhonda McMillan took the stand. In front of her were 3 test tubes. 1. Fiber from Jacob's truck, 1983. 2. Fiber on Jacob's bone, 2013. 3. Fiber from Briscoe's GMC rear seat, 2025. She placed each under the video microscope projected on screen. Identical weave pattern. Exact color match. Same polyester-cotton ratio. Same dye lot from the Michigan upholstery plant. Second quarter 1983. The room held its breath as she declared, "Not the same type, not similar." All 3 fibers came from the exact same seat, or the exact same GMC. Briscoe kept his head down, avoiding the jury's eyes. Camera timeline. Restored 1983. Footage. Next. The prosecution played the restored analog gas station video. Grainy and noisy, but the dark GMC was unmistakable. When the truck appeared at exactly 1:17 a.m., the entire courtroom leaned forward, as one. A forensic video technician explained. The truck appeared the moment Jacob left the bar. Its direction matched the vacant lot, where Jacob's Ford was later found. The timeline directly contradicted Briscoe's claim of being asleep at home. No juror looked at Briscoe, but everyone felt the weight. The 80-year-old witness, testimony that froze the courtroom. When Floyd Hanley, age 80, took the stand, the entire courtroom rose out of respect. He trembled but spoke clearer than anyone expected. He recounted, seeing Briscoe dig a large hole on the north side of the ranch. Seeing a long heavy burlap sack, looked like a body. Hearing the land dispute between Jacob and Briscoe. Being told by Briscoe to stay away from the north side for a few days. The prosecutor asked, "Mr. Hanley, do you have any reason to lie about this?" He answered softly, but with the weight of stone, "I had to speak, before it was too late. I carried this secret too long." No one in the room doubted the 80-year-old man was telling the truth. 3D reconstruction. The night of September 29, 1983, comes alive. At the end of the day, the prosecution played a full 3D simulation of the night Jacob disappeared. Jacob leaves the Rusty Spur at 1:10 a.m. Briscoe's GMC appears at the gas station at 1:17 a.m. Jacob walks toward the Concho River. The GMC's path intersects Jacob's route. Jacob is dragged into the truck, matches the luminol pattern. Truck heads straight to Briscoe Ranch. Body buried in the North Ranch area. 1-1 soil match. Years later, body exhumed and relocated to the oil field. The simulation was not just convincing, it brought Jacob's final moments back to life, leaving the jury silent. Evidence correlation. An unbreakable web. The prosecutor closed the day. No single piece of evidence in this case stands alone, but together they form a chain. Soil, fiber, camera, luminol, eyewitness. They paint one picture and one picture only. Harold Briscoe murdered Jacob Merritt, buried him on his ranch, then dug him up and moved him to hide the crime. The jury said nothing, but everyone understood they had just witnessed a historic trial, where modern science did what 1983 could not: uncover the truth buried for 40 years. The trial ended on the third day. Deliberations began, and San Angelo waited in silence for the verdict on a crime everyone thought time had forgiven. As the trial moved into the final closing arguments, prosecutor Melissa Hart knew the jury and the people of San Angelo needed more than just how Harold Briscoe killed Jacob Merritt. They needed to know why. A 40-year-old case cannot be closed with physical evidence alone. It has to be tied together with a clear logical motive that fits every proven act revealed by forensics. And finally, that motive emerged, not from one single piece of evidence, but from a chain of years-long conflicts between Jacob and Briscoe over land, money, and ownership. Issues that in Texas can sometimes weigh heavier than honor itself. The crack, the seed of a crime. The prosecution represented the full file on the small but strategically placed parcel on the western edge of Briscoe Ranch. Jacob Merritt wanted to buy that lot to expand his home site and secure additional business financing. Jacob and Briscoe had negotiated for over a year, from 1982 into mid-1983. At first, they were fairly friendly, attending the same ag fairs, going to the rodeo in Ballinger together. But by summer 1983, Briscoe suddenly doubled the asking price, infuriating Jacob, who believed the older man was price gouging once he learned Jacob was in financial trouble. The only witness who ever saw them argue was Floyd Hanley, whose testimony matched every detail of timing. He heard, "Not fair, I ain't signing. Are you threatening me?" The prosecution didn't need to prove every exact word, they only needed to prove the conflict had moved beyond negotiation, and that was undeniable. Debit and pressure. The final push bank record showed Jacob was $4,800 behind on a home improvement loan. A modest sum today, but in the 1980s, for a working man in San Angelo, it was crushing. Buying Briscoe's lot would have let him refinance and breathe again. Failing to buy it left him trapped. The prosecution introduced evidence. In August 1983, Jacob wrote the bank asking for an extension and included the line, "I believe the land purchase will resolve this." It confirmed the land deal was the center of Jacob's financial life, and that turned Briscoe from a seller into the man holding all the power. The night of September 29, 1983, conflict erupts into murder. The prosecution presented the behavioral 3D model. Jacob leaves the Rusty Spur at 1:10 a.m. Briscoe's GMC appears on gas station camera at 1:17 a.m. Retro-triangulated GPS and route analysis showed the GMC could intercept Jacob on Knickerbocker Road toward the Concho River. When the timelines were merged, Jacob, frustrated and drinking alone, Briscoe carrying resentment and fear that Jacob would report him to the land board. The two men meet in the vacant lot, no witnesses, no one to hear. The prosecutor argued, Jacob had no reason to cling to Briscoe's truck. If Jacob was dragged inside, it was not an accident. It was the deliberate act of a killer. The luminol stain pattern in the GMC cab perfectly matched a body being dragged in while unable to move. Not a drunk man, not someone who fell, a person who had been overpowered. The cover-up, the most damning proof of guilt. The prosecution stressed, innocent people do not move bodies. Forensic erosion timeline proved, Jacob was first buried in late 1983, remained in the ground, roughly 2-3 years, was exhumed around 1985, 1986, then relocated to the abandoned oil field. This showed calculated concealment, not panicked impulse. A random killer does not dig up a body after 3 years. Only someone whose burial site was suddenly at risk, perhaps from ranch expansion or earth moving, would do that. Furthermore, the GMC seat was replaced at the exact time forensics placed the body relocation. The old seat hidden in the barn showed Briscoe didn't dare throw it away for fear of curiosity. The soil match proved Briscoe buried the body on his own land. Classic overconfident killer behavior, believing no one would ever look there. This was not an accident, not self-defense, not a spur-of-the-moment act. This was premeditated murder, followed by prolonged calculated, decades-long evidence tampering. Closing argument, a motive clear as daylight. The prosecution concluded, years-long land dispute motive. Jacob's financial pressure making him more aggressive, escalating conflict. Briscoe fearing loss of land or expose a legal risk. Encountering Jacob in the lot opportunity. Attack and dragging Jacob into the truck the crime. Burying the body on the ranch initial cover-up. Digging it up and moving it to the oil field second cover-up. Replacing and hiding the seat continued evidence destruction. Changing stories with each new fact consciousness of guilt. These behaviors do not appear without a powerful sustained motive, fed by years of quiet resentment between two men. The prosecutor ended with a line that left the courtroom in total silence. Harold Briscoe's motive was not a moment. It was years in the making, a slow-burning pressure, an unresolvable dispute, and finally a decision that turned one man into a killer. 41 years, 6 months, and 12 days after Jacob Merritt walked out of the Rusty Spur and vanished into the night, the Tom Green County jury returned to the courtroom with their final verdict. No one spoke, no newspapers rustled. Even the old courthouse air conditioner seemed to fall silent, as if all of San Angelo was holding its breath. The four-person stood, holding the verdict form. We, the jury, find the defendant, Harold Dean Briscoe, guilty of murder in the first degree. There was no cheering, no applause, only the deep exhale of Jacob's family, a soft sound that carried the weight of an entire Texas sky finally lifting after 41 years. Briscoe showed no reaction. He simply closed his eyes, shoulders sagging like an old gate finally giving way to time. A man who had lived his whole life on his land, and was ultimately condemned by that very land. The sentence. Judge Whitford read the sentence, voice steady and hard. Life imprisonment without parole. Additional 20 years for removal of a corpse to conceal a crime. 5 years for tampering with and altering evidence. A final uncompromising judgment. A case everyone thought time had swallowed, was dragged back into the light by science, and the law answered with the maximum penalty. Briscoe was cuffed and led away. No longer the proud Texas rancher. Just a frail, diminished shadow slipping down the courthouse hallway like the final page of a long book closing. Case file, officially closed 1 week later, at the San Angelo Police Department, the case file received its final update. Normally the forensics vault is filled with mixed emotions, regret, anger, or the helplessness of unsolved cases. This time there was none of that, because everything had finally been put back in its rightful place. Detective Livingston personally stamped the last page in red, solved homicide, missing person 1983, case resolution 2026, clean, sharp, unadorned. The closest thing to justice Jacob's family would ever receive after 4 decades. Forensic chain of custody, a report cold as steel. The final forensic report was 312 pages, completed with absolute precision. Soil match parameters. Microscope photos of GMC fibers, luminol data from under the truck carpet, 1983 3D timeline reconstruction, erosion pattern confirming body relocation year, chain of custody from 2013 to 2026, every bone fragment bar-coded with SNP DNA profile, every GMC item sealed, weighed, photographed, coded. No emotion, no commentary, no interpretation. A document frightening in its accuracy, because it is the language of science, the language that finally brought Jacob home from silence. When Livingston slid the file into the cold case resolved drawer, he paused for a few seconds, not out of pride or sentiment, but from the clear realization that science had won against silence, won against concealment, won against 40 years of erasure. Final words, closing one night, returning one name. When the case was officially closed, Jacob's family held a small memorial on the banks of the Concho River, the last place he was ever seen. No crowd, no media, just a Texas sunset, a bouquet of flowers, and a name spoken aloud again, Jacob Merritt. After 41 years erased from maps, erased from files, erased from a town's memory, his name was finally returned to its rightful place. Not a missing person, not a John Doe, but a victim who was found, identified, and protected by justice. The case is closed, but the truth, and the way it was found, will live forever in the forensic records of Texas. The story of Jacob Merritt and Harold Briscoe is not just a Texas murder case, it is a mirror reflecting many very American issues today: forgotten missing persons, the quiet power of land and money, and the silent strength of science and of people willing to speak. Jacob vanished after one night at the Rusty Spur, and was erased from the map for 41 years, left only as an inactive missing person file. In the United States right now, tens of thousands of cases remain exactly like that. First lesson: a missing person is never just a file. If Jacob's family hadn't kept his memory alive, if authorities hadn't persistently entered the case into NAMUs and kept trying SNP, DNA, soil forensics, the bones in that abandoned oil field would forever have been unidentified remains. It reminds every one of us: respect missing persons cases, share information, support national databases, don't treat them as someone else's problem. Second lesson comes from Briscoe Ranch: land disputes, debt, feeling cornered. These are everyday American realities. If not handled openly and fairly, they can slide into violence. An argument over a parcel, a drawn-out conflict, a rancher's pride led to murder, burial, and reburial in 1986. In today's world, it reminds us to learn negotiation, to use the law and mediation, instead of letting ego and power push things past the point of no return. Finally, the 80-year-old witness, Floyd Hanley, and the cold as steel forensic report show, truth can arrive very late, but it needs both technology and human conscience. In a highly individualistic society, like America, sometimes the simplest moral lesson is this: don't stay silent in the face of wrong, no matter how many years have passed, because one late voice can still bring a person back to their rightful name and dignity. If you value the 41-year journey to justice for Jacob Merritt, please subscribe to join us for the next science-driven case breakdowns. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where the truth always finds its way home.